So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with today's vodcast. And again, as I mentioned, I'm Dr. Nika White. Today I'm being supported by two of my colleagues who I value tremendously, Natasha Portskova, who is a DEI manager with NWC, as well as Lindsay Morton, who is a DEI coordinator with our firm. And both of them are actually helping us with the production of today's event. And I also have Lauren Decay joined as backstage, who is another DEI manager with the firm. And so we're grateful to have a team of support. So as I normally do, I want to take us through a couple slides just so that you are aware of what's coming up. So next week, we have a wonderful guest co-host, my friend Charles Weathers. If you all are in South Carolina, for those of you who are joined from South Carolina, this is probably a very familiar name to you, a great practitioner in this space. There's a lot of work around the influence and the values of leadership and how that can help to advance or even derail DEI efforts. And so we look forward to hearing from Charles Weathers on February 5th. And then the following week, my friend Joe Gertstadt is actually going to be joining me. I'm so excited about Joe. Joe and I connected a few years ago when we both were speaking at a DEI conference, and I just thought that his message was so resonating, and I really wanted to make sure that he remained in my network. And so we've kept in touch, and I'm glad that he's going to be joining me to actually share. And we're going to be talking about how to respond to the difference that we created, how we utilize it, and how our actions or reactions to it can shape our personal and professional networks. And so Natasha, my colleague, is actually going to be co-hosting that with me. So I look forward to that as we welcome Joe. And then the next slide. Okay, so it does me a great honor to be able to introduce to some of you, and hopefully maybe even have some of you who are already familiar with Karen to learn a little bit deeper about her today and her work. But Karen Hinds is a friend. I consider her a friend. I'm so glad that she has decided to accommodate her schedule to grace us with her knowledge, her wisdom, and her expertise. I want to, as I normally do, give her a formal introduction. And then after that, I'm going to show a video clip that's going to put her in action, in her element. I want you to see the reason that we thought fit to invite her today. So a little bit about Karen Hinds. She used her experience in building talent pipelines for financial services companies to launch her company over 20 years ago. Her company is called Workplace Success Group. It is a boutique strategic talent development firm that works with organizations to cultivate and retain their next generation of leaders. Through her work with the Caribbean Development Bank and Dodge Training from the United Kingdom, Karen has facilitated leadership programs with government leaders from 19 Caribbean and South American nations. She is the author of not one, not two, not three, not four, but five books. And her most recent include Get Along, Get Ahead, 101 Courtesies for the New Workplace, Networking for a Better Position and More Profit, and A Young Adult's Guide to the Global Workplace. She has been quoted in and featured in or written articles for Black Enterprise, Family Circle, the Boston Globe, the Hartford Business Journal, and the CIM Toronto Manager, just to name a few. Karen has worked with companies like Turner Construction, Avangrid, Webster Bank, AmeriHealth, Caritas, United Technologies, and the list goes on and on. Again, just to name a few. She's a graduate of Bowdoin College with a bachelor's degree in political science and Spanish. Karen was also a recipient of the National Thomas J. Watson Foundation Fellowship, which is a grant that enables recipients to pursue a year-long independent study outside of the United States. The fellowship was established by the children of Thomas J. Watson, a former chairman and CEO of IBM. And so before I allow you to hear from Karen, we're going to hear this small clip of Karen in her element from an event that she did that I happen to have also been a part of. And so keep your eyes onto the screen.
So my question to you is, what is your personal strategy? There are three things I want you to remember today. One, I want you to take ownership from today. I'm not talking about the company goals. I'm not talking about your organizational endeavors. I'm talking about how are you going to take ownership? The ownership is the first piece that I want you to think about. Number two, I want you to think about what consistent action are you prepared to take. The talk is really wonderful. Oh, yes, I went to fabulous diversity inclusion workshop, and Nika seems a great job. So what? Tomorrow morning, you're going to go back to your regular day-to-day and give me excuses. I don't want excuses. I want consistent action. I don't want you to stop there because anybody can do that. Karen says, ownership. Let's take consistent action. But then I want you to take it one step further. I want you to multiply yourself. I want you to become infectious. I want, if you walk into a room, you don't have to see your diversity strategy. They should see it all on you. Because everything you do on a daily basis, whether or not you have a title, oozes diversity and inclusion.
So let me just say, just that little clip alone, even though I was there live a couple years ago when you did that, now when I hear it, I still get the same chills. Consistent action, not excuses. Multiply yourself. I love it, Karen. I love the energy that you bring.
Thanks, Nika. Thanks for being here.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here and accepting our invite. I always say that we don't take for granted when people say yes, especially busy individuals like yourself. And so I'm really excited. Some people are saying that she's got me pumped into the chat. And so yes. Well, hang on to your seats, everyone. So Karen, I always start the conversation with, of course, giving all of the wonderful accolades and credentials of our guest co-hosts because they've earned, that deserving those titles to be amplified. But I always like to start with my guest co-host just sharing their story. What is it that we don't know about you that we cannot find out from reading your bio? Tell us your story, Karen.
Gosh, when I think about my journey over the last 22 plus years, if you'd asked me if this is what I would be doing, I would say no. I don't know anything about this. But I'm a Caribbean girl. I didn't grow up in an area that we talked about race because it was more of a classist society, more so than focus on race. So the topic of race was very new to me when I came to the United States. And it took me a while to figure that out. So I think that my understanding, my international perspective of race, and the fact that I like eating exotic foods and have a competition with my dad to see who can eat the most exotic thing. The list is pretty interesting. To say the least. So let's just say lots of critters are on that list. So that's what share with your audience. Besides the work that I've been doing around DEI, there's a fun side to me as well.
No, that's amazing. And I know there's a fun side to you because we've had an opportunity throughout, the time that we've been connected to really support each other in our endeavors. And I love the work that you're doing. It is so tremendous. And so Karen, one of the things that we always like to bring into the conversation are some of those headline newsworthy information that people have top of mind. And so some big news has been occurring, since January hit 2021. This week, some really big news hit, and it's the news of Rosalind Brewer, the new CEO appointed to Walgreens, who is the former chief operating officer of Starbucks. And her career history is amazing, but now she has reached a point that has certainly shattered glass ceilings. And I want to get your reaction about it. I'm super excited, and I'm proud to see a woman of color that is deservingly being able to take her rightful place of power and influence in a way that I think is going to really inspire so many others. But, I'm also aware that the sentiments of some people is that, gosh, it's about time. How are we celebrating the fact that here we are? Because I believe she is the first Black female CEO of a Fortune 500, if I'm not mistaken. And so just your reactions to that news.
First of all, of course I'm excited. You have a Black VP and a Black CEO in less than 30 days. As a Black woman myself, it's an extraordinary time. At the same time, as exciting and as happy as I am, it's also sad because you recognize so many other women are waiting and knocking on doors and saying, I am just as qualified for other positions. I shouldn't have to be the first or the only one. We want to be able to have access, which brings us back to why I do this work. It's about access. So I'm thrilled that she has gotten the access to now lead in that position, not only as a CEO, but it's also breaking barriers for HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, where the sentiment has been, well, what kind of caliber of people are we producing? And I think if we look at the last few weeks and you've been paying attention to the news, a lot of the women who've risen in the last few weeks in the news headlines are from HBCUs. So she joins that rank, but there's so many other women out there, Black women, who are saying, I am willing and ready and qualified. Open that door.
Yes, open that door. I love that. You're right. And HBCUs are really getting a lot of love right now and attention that is well overdue. And so I'm here for all of that. Yes. And by the way, for those of you who maybe have not been privy to the news of Rosalind Brewer, that Mauricio, one of our guests today, he actually placed a link into the chat for you to read up on that. So thank you, Mauricio. We love getting resources. So if any of you have resources that you think are going to complement our conversations today, please place those into the chat. And so I want to get a poll going quickly, because while I'm a big fan and I know of you and your work, and I think that a lot of people that are in my network who are part of the upstate South Carolina community are familiar with you, because we brought you here, and I'm so glad we were able to do that.
Thank you for doing that.
And of course, I just want to get a poll going. How many of you have heard or been exposed to Karen Hinds and either one of her 5 books, or either maybe you've heard her speak before? I just want to kind of get a sense of the level of familiarity that this community has with you. And while we're getting that poll up and ready, I want to go ahead and go to the next question. So you talk a lot about making diversity, equity, and inclusion personal. What does that look like? How do you make the work of DEI personal?
I think it's looking at what role we can play. So when we think of DEI, we know that racism is systemic, but it's held in place by individuals who have biases and blind spots. So it's the individuals are making decisions. So in order for us to change systems, we have to change individuals. So when I think about how do we make an impact, it's looking at each individual person saying, what do I have in my power now? And how can I make a decision that can impact change? And that's really important, because when you think of the CEOs, if they don't internalize this, if they don't take ownership of this on a personal level, change becomes difficult. You think of the manager, you think of the person who's the individual contributor. If they don't get this on a personal level, it then becomes just very rote. It doesn't become anything of substance.
I love that. And we're going to dig deeper and unpack that. But the reason that I love this question and this topic is because I often share that the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it starts at the personal level. The bottom line is that personal awareness is so critical, because let's think about it, Karen. People are the ones who are running institutions, organizations, society in general. So if people at the personal level do not get the value and appreciate the value to where then they're called to action to model it, then they're not going to be able to take that mindset and those strategies and put them to practice in the organizations or whatever endeavors in which they may serve. And so I love that.
And think about it this. So we do a lot of work with executive teams. That's where we start our work, because you can't start this work and be truly effective and sustain it anywhere else. It has to have the buying, because they have the resources. They're the decision makers. Right. So we have one CEO that we're working with. That individual is completely bought in because they had a personal experience with DEI. That CEO's daughter called them out on something that happened around race and racism. And it was a learning opportunity for that CEO. That individual has now taken a much different approach, that CEO, to the work of his organization. I have another CEO that we're working with, and a lot of them most of them are all men. They're all mostly white men. This other gentleman we're working with, he has had just about zero contact on a personal level with DEI. So even though we're doing the same work, the results will be different, because that individual, he hasn't bought in. He's just doing the steps. It's not a connection. The people in his organization can feel it. There's no real buy-in. There's no real passion. There's no real change. Whereas the other individual, they get it, and it's become a part of the fabric of the organization. That's what we're talking about.
That is so powerful, Karen. And I think that you're onto something. If we can, as practitioners and champions and advocates of this DEI work, get people to have some type of personal experience, it will deepen their commitment to the work.
It sure will.
So I love that. And personal experiences, to your point, can come in so many different shapes, forms, and fashion. It could be someone has, a relative that maybe has been a victim of oppression, and that causes them to, again, just have a deepened level of empathy and compassion for equity and belongingness for all. There's a variety of ways in which people can get that personal experience.
Yeah, and I'd say we have to start at the personal level, because a lot of the workshops that we're working with, a lot of the people that we're meeting with, when we meet with our leaders, we create a very safe space for leaders to be real, for them to exist in no judgment. We say no judgment, no blaming, no shaming.
Yes.
And what we're finding is we're hearing leaders say, well, you know what? I need to be honest. I grew up in a predominantly white environment where maybe there was one family of color, but I really haven't had a substantive conversation with somebody who thinks very different from me. And my world hasn't been impacted by race or racism where I'm woken up. So when the murder of George Floyd happened, for a lot of people, it was like, wait, what just happened? How come I didn't learn about this in school? This is all very new. So we have to be cognizant that for a lot of individuals, they're now learning. And in order for them to learn, we can't beat them over the head with this information. It's a learning process. Now, when it's blatant, we need to say something, of course. But people need to learn. Give them the space to learn. Let's create that space. And recognize that some people it's a very scary topic. I'm not giving excuses. I'm just saying there's a segment of the population that genuinely wants to learn, and some who don't care. But for those who want to learn, let's call them in.
That is spot on. I love the fact that you said we want to call in and not call people out. That's important as well. And it reminds me, yes, people are entering this conversation at different places within their journey, and we have to respect that. I think that if we are able to just align with that truth, and I think it helps to prevent us from becoming so frustrated by the process, right?
Yes.
I recently wrote a blog article on the 5 mental models of DEI work in terms of how in which people are entering into the conversation. And I'm sure my team is probably already on it, but I think that it'll be value for this community to have access to that link. So please place it as a resource. But you're right. When we are invisible to the depth and the severity of these issues, then there's no way we're going to be called to action, right?
Exactly. And because
us.
No, I like to think of it this way. So for a lot of us who are probably on the call, let's break it down even in a different way. Race and racism might seem very scary, but think of the people around us who are also differently abled. When you walk into a building, do you really think about how do you access that building? You get up, you walk up the stairs, and you go. If you're in a wheelchair, you have to think ahead of time. And if it's the same mindset where if you're not exposed to someone who might be in a wheelchair, if you're not exposed to someone who might be from a different ethnicity, if you're not exposed to someone who might be intellectually different, and you think of all the different categories of diversity, if you're not exposed, how do you know if you don't purposely put yourself in a position to know? So that is why we need to encourage those who are listening. This has to become personal. This has to be something that you're interested in or be at least willing to learn. Let's put it that way.
No, absolutely. You have to have, the authentic curiosity is what I hear people refer to it sometimes as, because you're going to have to be willing to expose yourself and open yourself up to learning.
Yes.
And what a place of privilege it is to be when these issues are invisible to you, right? I mean, let's think about that too.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, so I want to acknowledge that we also are live on Facebook too. So I always like to make sure I acknowledge those who are joining by that platform. And thank you. If you have any comments, certainly place them there. We're watching the comments there, and we want to bring them into this community. And by the way, in our poll, it's about 75-25. You have 76% of this audience that today is their first time actually hearing you speak. So what a treat you're getting. And then 25%, that's actually, to be exact, 24.
Well, hello to the 70%. This Caribbean girl is glad to be sharing her wisdom with you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So you have 5 steps that you talk about as it relates to, again, making the work of DEI personal. Why don't you give us an overview of what those 5 steps are, please?
Sure. I think the first one is just listening. Because this is so, for a lot of individuals, this is new work. This is new terminology. They just need to start listening. We all have a different journey. My journey as a Caribbean woman, coming to the United States as a girl, and then going to Brunswick, Maine. And that was my initiation.
Wow.
Wow. So understanding that we all have different journeys and different experiences. So don't assume that everybody lives the way you do. Don't assume that everybody had the same experience. So I see that a lot when I hear individuals say, well, if you want to move up, just do this, 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 and this. Well, maybe I've done that. It didn't work for me because of the color of my skin, because of you fill in the blank. So first, let's get to the point of listening. Listening to the pain. We have a lot of people who've experienced traumatic experiences because of the color of their skin. I know I'm a mother of a 22-year-old Black young man, and he's very dark skin complexion. His skin is very dark, and he's had very interesting experiences. So not only listen for the journey, but there's also pain, and you just have to listen. Nobody's asking you to fix anything. Just listen, and that's the first step. Be open to hearing something different. That's the first one. Let me know when you're ready for the second one. Can't hear you, Nika.
I'm so sorry. I said you're on a roll. No, we're ready for all of them. Let's go ahead to number 2.
So the second one is when people listen, what I hear a lot of our executive teams say, how could I not have known that this was happening in America? How did I not learn this in school? And they seem very baffled by all of this happening here. So the second step is, now is the perfect time to educate yourself. This is a time when of course, this conversation that we're having here, but there's also lots on Netflix. There's also lots on YouTube. There are books you can read. There's tons of resources that I think in the last year have come to light that maybe it was a little bit harder to find before that. So now is the time to become a sponge, a human sponge, and soak up that information, soak up and understand, what is systemic racism. Understand that there are lots of Black people who've done some phenomenal contributions, not only in education, but in economics, in healthcare, in so many different areas. So educate yourself, and educate yourself not just in the traditional sources, but find outlier educators, so to speak, and figure out what is it you need to really comprehend and soak in. And the third one I would say is to address the fears. This topic is very fear-inducing for some individuals because nobody wants to be pointing a finger at, how come you never did? Or I can't believe. And there's a sense of, oh, wait a minute, I need to step back. So address the fears that you have. I've heard individuals say, well, I want to ask a question, but I'm scared that somebody's going to think that's a dumb question you ask. So it's important for you to identify the fears that are seeming real to you. So fears, false, evidence appearing real. We all know that very acronym. So it could be that you have this made up in your mind based on your blind spots, based on the biases, because you've not been exposed. So there's these fears that come up that make you afraid to talk about race. I don't know a whole lot. I'm not a race expert. I'm not sure. I'm a white person, or I'm a Latina, or you fill in the blank. We have all these excuses about why we are scared. And you have to address that because there are other individuals who will come alongside you and learn and be with you as you go through. The fourth one is start small. This does not need to be rocket science. I say start in your own backyard. You have a backyard of friends and family who they're trying to figure this out as well. So start small with the people in your family. I say if you're a parent, have these conversations with your children. If you no longer have young children, you have cousins, you have aunts, you have uncles, you have parents who may think very different from you. So start where it's safe. I had one executive mention, said, where his backyard was, he would normally invite friends over for drinks. And the conversation, he became aware of how off-putting the jokes were. And after attending one of our workshops, we had a follow-up session. He says, Karen, the way I started small was to call out my neighbor on those bad jokes that had racial undertones that were no longer funny to me. And I used to think they were funny. It's something that simple. For him, he said, it took me every ounce of courage to call out a friend on something like that. But for him, that is where he started small. I have one gentleman who said as well, I keep saying gentlemen because we work majority with C-suite and we work a lot of work. We do a lot of work with our individual contributors as well. But the stories that I find powerful are those individuals who have never been exposed. So one executive said the way he started small was by being an ally. Because there's a woman in his department who wanted to transfer to another part of the company. And in the past, he said, I would just say, all right, call this person, call that person. And he said, now I know I could do more because within my power, I could literally have a conversation with her. I can follow up with her. I can make introductions for her. And it wasn't costing him anything other than a few moments of his time, which as a leader, his job is to grow people. So that's something he should be doing anyway. But he said the old version of himself before he became aware was just to pass names along instead of actually coming alongside someone and saying, as an ally, this is not a 5-minute thing like, oh, I made a referral. It's a lifelong commitment. So he came alongside her and he's continuing to be that ally and mentor that she needs. And the last one is you have got to, in every situation where you see injustice, where you see people being marginalized, where you see people being taken advantage of, you have a voice. Use it to speak up. And we often hear people say, well, you know what? I don't really have power. I don't have privilege. You do. I have power. I have power and privilege as a woman who's a CEO of an international company who works in large organizations, as the daughter of Caribbean immigrants. I have privilege there because the people in my island, I can use my privilege to help them. So we all have levels of privilege. My question to you is, what are you doing with it? And what I would implore you to do is speak up. When you see something's not right, speak up. And you don't need to be a race expert, for goodness sake. You don't need to be a systemic racism expert to understand when wrong is wrong and you're in the presence of wrong, you have an obligation to say something. And those are my 5 steps there, Miss Nika White.
I wish I had a mic right now that I could drop for you. There's so many great nuggets that you just dropped. I mean, I was like chatting in the chat as well as trying to read some of the sentiments from those who are just getting this wonderful experience of hearing from you. So much. I mean, when you talked about fear, that so resonated with me because I hear people say all the time that fear certainly has diminished candor. People don't know what to say, so they stay in their bubble because they're afraid of making mistakes. And so when you talked about how we have to just choose courage over comfort and we can't let fear keep us at a place of not being able to address this work. And yes, I love the broad context of privilege. I think oftentimes it gets so narrow to where we only talk about it as white privilege. And let me go on record saying, yes, white privilege is a thing. It is real. We all have levels of privilege, right? What's important is to acknowledge our sources of power and privilege and then use it honorably to help someone else along the way. So those 5 tips are amazing. I mean, we have to educate ourselves. I mean, so much good things are happening in the chat right now. Yes. And that last one, high intolerance for injustice. You can't sit at a place that leads others to question whether or not we are even paying attention, just paying attention. So I love that. So continue to place your questions into the chat. Those are being curated and they're being placed in the backstage, and we're going to get to those in just a second. What's become clearer for you maybe over the past 12 months concerning DEI? Because a lot has shifted and changed. The language and conversation is changing. So what's maybe 1 to 2 things that's become clearer for you?
For me, I think before the last 6 to 12 months, having a conversation that DEI and leadership development are the same, one and the same, I had companies pushing back and saying, no, have DEI here and leadership here. And I would always say, no, DEI and leadership need to come to converge and go together. So it's become crystal clear for a lot of the companies that we work with. You cannot develop leaders who do not have a high DEI understanding. It's not possible. You are not an effective leader, because ultimately, as I said, your job as a leader is to grow people. And if you don't know how to grow different kinds of people, you end up with this garden with the same exact thing. And I like using farming analogies because my parents were farmers growing up. So that's the first thing that's come abundantly clear. Another thing that's come clear is there are a lot of individuals who are hungry for more, who want to learn, but they're scared. Yeah. You have to, it's a fact. It's not about if we like to hear that or not. It's what we're seeing in all the work that we're doing. So it's a making sure that we continue to do this work and create safe spaces for those people who are learning, but also create safe spaces for those who've been oppressed and who've been challenged and who've been marginalized. So we're not doing either or, it's both. We have to do both at the same time.
So both, and I love that. Mm-hmm. And so you and I are definitely, fit from the same cloth as it relates to leadership and DEI being one and the same. I often say that being inclusion minded and operating with the lens of equity, those are leadership competencies.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think what's critically important to amplify is that it's not just leadership by way of position and title, but it's leadership by way of influence. Yes. And if we think about it in that regard, we can lead from any place in the organization, regardless of what our titles are, because some people do see the work of DEI as the responsibility of people leaders, managers, supervisors, or even like those who carry the title of chief diversity officer, manager, director, or the HR professionals. And the missed opportunity there is it causes them to be somewhat passive about it, thinking that someone else is going to take care of this work. It's not my responsibility. I don't have to own it.
Yes. And that is why I am so strong about taking personal ownership of DEI. Because what I've seen happening is an organization will bring in a DEI officer. And everybody goes, hands off, we're done. Okay, we can go home now. No, you cannot.
Problems all solved, right?
So how is that one individual supposed to, essentially fix an organization? So for DEI to work, this has to become everyone's responsibility. It's not the Black people's responsibility. It's not the white people's responsibility. It's not the Latinx responsibility. It's not the people who are native to this country, their responsibility. It is all of our responsibilities. Because what's happening is at this moment, the focus is on the Black community. However, we're not the only marginalized community. We have Asian Americans. We have indigenous communities who are here. We have, the list can go on. So what this moment in history should teach us is that there are a lot of people who are not enjoying or having access. There are a lot of people and communities who have been marginalized. Our job is to begin to create spaces that are inclusive for everyone, not just certain kinds of individuals.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Okay, so there are lots of questions are coming in. And
Let's see what we have.
I know I don't want to deny this audience of being able to have their questions answered by you. And so I'm going to address this first one. How could we react when, upon calling in someone of power, they out themselves as being unwilling to learn? Oh my gosh, that is so good. And I see it all the time.
Welcome to my world.
Oh my gosh, I know. As DEI practitioners, often what we share with people, and I'm sure you do this as well, is part of our job is to help clients get out of their own way so that this work can really happen, right?
Yes.
So how would you answer that?
It happened this week. So first of all, that individual is not in a space to learn yet. And I say yet. So think about relationships. This is a relationship. This work is not for everyone. So if you expect to come in and say, let me explain to you why racism is such a horrible thing, and I have all the answers, and here's the data, you're coming up against somebody's identity. So if you believe that you're cut out for this piece, this individual, give them opportunities to learn more because they're not ready to hear yet. They're the CEO, they're the leader. It's even more important. So if you have a relationship, I say give him or her information in bite-sized pieces, have conversations, because they're not in a position to learn. And beating them over the head with information is not going to help. Or you find someone else who may have access to them, and you begin to become very strategic about how you get information flowing to them. I have that right now with a CEO who hired us. They're paying money to learn about DEI, and they're the one who are the biggest resistor. It's a matter of education. And if that doesn't work, then you need to step back, because some people may not be ready. And you have to give them the space to process. People need processing time.
No, I love that. That is so true. I experience a lot of the same. And, we as practitioners and, again, champions of this work, we can't become disheartened. We have to just realize that, again, maybe sometimes what our role is at that juncture is to plant the seed and let somebody else come behind you and water it. So I love the idea of being strategic and identifying maybe others who have a level of influence with those key stakeholders that may be able to help bring them along. But otherwise, it could frustrate the process and cause us to maybe want to go hands off.
Yes, I can't deal with that. And I think that's the misconception that a lot of people who do this work or who have been involved with this work, they get burnt out. And I like to say, pick your lane. So my lane 25 years ago when I was in college was to be the one out there with the placards and the signs and protesting. And that I was that girl. Now I'm a lot older. I'm a lot older. And my lane has shifted. I am now working in a different capacity. So I think it's important, if you're in this work, to figure out what lane energizes you. And when that lane no longer energizes you, take a step back and rejuvenate yourself, because this is a marathon, not a sprint. And we can't expect everyone, some people will, we can expect everyone to, the minute you speak, that it's like opening the Red Sea and whoa, they have this moment. They may not, because their grandmother, their uncle, their father, everybody has taught them certain ways of existing in the world. You are one individual they met at work or at a bar. Well, we don't go to bars anymore. Or maybe you met them on the street, wherever. They saw you on TV. But you're one individual who's coming up against decades of programming, decades of conditioning. So you have to give them the space to get on board. It's a process, not something that's going to happen overnight for some people. Some people it's quick, some others not.
Yeah, it is definitely a process. That was a great question. So thank you to our audience member that submitted it. It reminded me that just this week I tweeted, and I'm looking at my tweet now, DEI practitioners, we can't save every organization. Present opportunities and let them do the work. I think that sometimes they feel like just by hiring maybe like a chief diversity officer or even a DEI consultant, that's going to solve all the problems. No,
it doesn't.
No. Yes. That does not eliminate the need for doing the hard work, rolling up the sleeves and doing the hard work.
Exactly.
Okay. So this next question comes from Sophie. Thanks for joining, Sophie. And her question is, for those who are unwilling to change and unwilling to see the realities of our society in terms of racial discrimination and inequalities, how do you know when it's the right time to just walk away or to keep fighting? Or is fighting not worth it for people who refuse to expand their minds and perspectives?
I would say always look for fertile soil. Again, farming is my life. Look for fertile soil. So there are individuals, if you have a relationship with them, you will rub off on them eventually if they're open. If they're not, there's nothing you can do. So your job is to not constantly beat your head against the wall like that. But plant a seed, water it. If you see it's kind of dry, walk away and go find that other individual. They're thirsty. They're salivating for this information. And if you feed that person, they might be the one who can impact this individual here. What we often do is we spend so much time on the negative, cynical, frustrated, individuals, that we miss the golden opportunities for those who are salivating and want more.
That is so good. That is so good. Find the fertile soil. I love that. Yeah. So thank you so much for your question, Sophie. And by the way, that first question that we got today was from Alex. And so thank you. So here's another question, and it comes from Lynn Roy. How do you recharge within DEI as you continue on this journey to impact change, coach and re-educate people and communities? So how do you recharge?
I have a rule. I have a girlfriend who she's very much into politics. She's into this work. She's not in this space. She's just a friend of mine who owns her own cleaning company. But her thing is, let's talk politics. Let's talk racism. And that's just how she is. So I put borders and boundaries around myself. So from 9 to 5, I'll talk this all day. At the end of the day, don't talk to me about this. I need to go and sit somewhere in a corner with some lemonade, some coconut water, my favorite Caribbean dish. And I do not talk about racism. I do not talk about DEI. I don't talk about anything that pertains to my work. And that is a regular practice of mine. So at the end of the day, I turn it off and I create a space where I can think. I do allow myself time, and let's go to the media as well. I do allow myself in my personal life to have limited conversations, because otherwise I'll be so depleted I can't do anything. So I set the time when I will discuss this, when I'll talk about it, and I decide how often I will do it in order for me to stay energized and ready for the clients that we're working with and for the family members, because I can't just turn off being Black. It doesn't happen, but I can control how much of my energy and the conversations that I have around it and how I react to ignorant people. So there's some people I'm thinking, you know what, not today. I'm not going to address your foolishness. Have a nice day, ciao, and I move on. So I pick my battles.
Good for you. Good for you. Pick your battles. So continue to submit your questions. I want to go to a question that I have now to present it to you. And so we've been doing at Nika White Consulting, we've been doing a lot of these leadership, organizational readiness kind of assessment sessions with leaders. And part of that is really just getting the leaders of those organizations to engage around this one question. As it pertains to DEI, do you wish for your organization to lead, to align, or to lag? And I find that as they engage each of them in their thoughts about the role of the organization and how it should engage in this broader work of DEI, there's usually some misalignment, and a lot of them will say, yes, we want to lead. And then we back up and we say, well, what does that look like? What does exemplary leadership look like from a DEI perspective? And then, if that's when really the conversation gets to this place where you start to reveal that, okay, maybe you aren't quite ready yet.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to share that with you and get your reaction. What's an approach maybe to help organizations to best decipher, I think, an important question like, do you want to lead? Do you want to align? Or do you want to kind of follow and not be an early adopter, but allow others to step out there and then you kind of jump on the bandwagon?
Yeah, we're asking that same question in a different way to the clients that we work with, because you get a lot of phone calls. Hi, I'd like to have some DEI work, please. Can you come right in? And our leaders are ready. And you walk into the virtual room and you begin to listen. They haven't allocated any dollars. Like, this work is not free. So there's no resources. They can't find time for meetings. They haven't even had, there are other issues like trust and commitment issues within the team. And when that exists, you can't do DEI work. So I think for a lot of organizations, it's not only are they ready to lead, align, or lag, it's do they even have a healthy organizational culture to begin with, where leaders feel like they can be listened to and there's trust and commitment in that team before they even get to DEI. And if you don't have that piece in place, you can do DEI strategies till the cows come home and nothing will happen, because there's not a level of trust or commitment on other issues. And DEI becomes like an appendage that's hanging off. After a while, it would just fall right off. So that's how we do it.
No, I love that. I'm interested in kind of getting a poll going for this audience. I want to know, and let's just, the question should be along the lines of, does your organization right now lead, align, or lag? Lead, align, or lag? We just kind of want to see where at least this community perceives their organizations may be. I think it's a great conversation to have, especially if you are a part of the leadership team within your respective organizations, just to engage others to make sure there's some alignment around how in which you want to be moving forward with your commitment to DEI. And so while that poll is getting created, I want to talk about Black History Month, or I like to refer to it as Black Heritage Month as well, because it is upon us almost. And I find it interesting that there's still a large number of organizations that don't really observe or have any type of recognition or acknowledgement of Black history. And so what do you advise your clients when they come to you and they say, Karen, okay, so historically we haven't done Black History Month, but we're feeling like there's this deepened appetite for us to be much more intentional. What do you suggest we do?
I always ask them, why do you want to do this now?
Right. That is a good question to start with. Why now? What exactly
what now? And then I also ask, besides Black History Month, have you celebrated other heritage months throughout the year? And if they say no, I said, before you create a Black History Month event, think about your strategy for the entire year, because it's going to seem very inauthentic. So, hey, we're celebrating Black History Month, and then you're quiet for the rest of the year until February in 2022, and you go, we're celebrating Black History. So what is the reason behind wanting to do this now? What resources do you have to support this? And what's the strategy moving forward for the other heritage months? And I often ask, do you even have something as basic as a holiday calendar? Because you often talk about, where do we start? Want to get moving? It makes no sense to do a Black History Month if everything else in your culture is misaligned, because it sends the wrong message. So we talk about why first, we talk about strategy, we talk about long-term approach before you go and launch a month, because you have a leader who is being extremely inauthentic and you have this great program being put on. It's just a program.
No, I love that. Yep. And programs have start and end dates. This work is not a destination. It is a journey. And so I love that. That's really good sound advice. So by the way, our poll on lead, align, or lag, we have 50%, this saddens me, that indicated lag. We have 17% align, and 33% of our audience indicates lead. So that's our poll.
It's tough though. If I may just say quickly, we are working with a company. There are over 10,000 employees strong throughout the United States and other parts of the world. That particular CEO has decided to not only lead his company, but lead the industry. It is a significant commitment on his part. However, he sees the ROI as much more than financial. He sees the holistic picture. So to lead an organization in DEI, it means that your CEO has to be very aware and woke, as they say, to be able to know that this is not a DEI initiative. This is a culture change. This is about relevancy for your organization beyond 2021. It's also about sustainability over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So when the CEO is able to see that, they're not just seeing DEI, they're seeing the business case, they're seeing the human case. Therefore, it takes on a different significance than just are we going to lead, lag, or align. So that's important.
No, I love that. And you're right. As we are engaging in those discussions with our clients, we certainly ask questions about, we're not just talking about internally within your organizational culture, but do you see yourselves as wanting to be kind of a standard bearer or how to do this work at an exemplary level within the industry? And so, that's what helps to create, again, that competitive advantage and bring others along, right? So
and we're missing out on all that great talent and all the other innovative ideas by having the same old every day. I have great stories about companies who woke up and realized, wow, we have all these people in our organization who can help us move along quicker. They were always there.
So I'm just interested, another poll for the audience. Does your organization observe Black History Month? So there's a poll out there. I want to get you all to please engage with us in the poll. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So there's a couple additional questions that have come. This one's from Dawn. This work of DEI is tremendous and seemingly daunting. How do I support predominantly white executive leaders without bailing them out when it comes to DEI work in an organization?
That's a good one. How do you support without bailing them out? Always, educate, and ask for some kind of commitment. What are they going to be accountable for? Because some people are hiding, I need to learn more. You don't need to learn anymore. You know, injustice is not right. And that's all you need to know. If you know injustice is not right, how much more education do you need? You can learn. It's like you can build a plane as you fly it, as they say. So for the leaders, help them educate, but ask them, what commitment are they making? What are you going to hold them accountable for? Or ask them, what are they going to do? What's the action item that they're going to take after they've learned or after you've exposed them or whatever it is you're doing with them? I think that's important. So accountability.
This is so good. I just amplified this into the chat. Injustice is not right. How much more education do you need?
Can I get a copy of this chat?
Only if it really were that simple. But yes, I love it. I love it. Okay. So another question.
Before you go on to the next question, I saw someone had asked earlier on, what are the 5 things that I mentioned? It was listen, educate, address fears, start small, and speak up.
Yes. Hopefully you all got that. I'm sure my team is probably also just amplifying it into the chat. So this next question comes from Rachel, and she says, Karen, how do you deal with companies who retain you for compliance issues only?
We do a lot of vetting before we take an assignment. So we never, companies try that. And we've gotten really smart before all of that has transpired in the last year to know when it's a compliance conversation.
Yeah.
And that has taken time. So we don't do any kind of compliance work because we press them so hard that they don't want to work with us because they know that we're not going to let them slide.
Same.
And I don't, if you dangle money in front of us, we don't normally engage until after maybe 3 or 4 conversations, because I need to make sure that we're investing in the right company and the company is investing in us. So if we can't meet with your CEO to have a conversation, it's a compliance issue. If we're not going to be a part of that. So we need to meet with the executive team. We're meeting with HR. We're having a number of conversations. And by the 3rd or 4th conversations, they have a pretty good idea that we're not your run-of-the-mill consulting company simply after it for the money. And nothing's wrong with those companies who do compliance. It's just not our sweet spot. So we stay away from those assignments.
No, we should find ways to partner because that is our philosophy. 100. Absolutely.
No, we're not doing that. Stuff,
and that it goes to show you that there's not one consultancy is not a one size fits all approach. You really need to make sure that you're aligning with where you are from organizational readiness, but really you're what's driving you to do this work, and then find a consultant partner that's going to walk that path with you. And just be mindful that not every consultant is going to want to align with you if this is a compliance kind of checkbox situation.
That's a check the box. We don't do check the box.
No, nor do we. So I love that. I appreciate that. So going back to our Black History Month poll, we have 50-50 now. It just changed as I was speaking, but 50% says yes, their organization observes Black History Month, and 50% said no. So yeah, about half and half. So Karen, I lost visual to you. I'm not sure if that's just me or what, but nonetheless, I feel like I still can hear you. Are you still there?
Yeah, okay. I can't see you, but I can hear you fine.
Oh,
the show must go on.
The show must go on. And the great thing is that we're kind of already at, almost at our breaking point. But one of the things that I often like to do before I let my audience go is to ask our guest co-host to share with us, what have we not talked about today that you have a lot of passion around and you want this audience to know? Share that with us. What's coming up for you right now?
Wow, what's coming up for us right now? Your guests can hop on to our website, workplacesuccess.com, where we have free resources in our Workplace Success University. They can listen to some of our courses there. So that's one place you can take advantage of. Doesn't cost you a thing. So you're more than welcome to join in and join that conversation there. And I think the next piece is I'm working on my next book. It's going to be around personal power, how to make impact. There you go. Your visual is back, and ensuring that. So you'll be hearing about that. So, connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with me through our university, wherever platform you're on, and let's start a conversation.
We're excited for book number 6. When do you find the time to do all of this?
I don't have the traditional. I just kind of write stuff down and then I collect all the notes and then organize. So
I love it. I absolutely love it. That's been fantastic. Okay. So Karen, I always share again how grateful I am for guests who see it fit to accept our invitation. It makes us feel seen, valued, and heard. And I just want to thank you again. I appreciate our friendship and the support that you have of me. And I love what you're doing. Keep letting your light shine. Keep continuing to create impact for individuals and organizations. And yeah, we're just grateful that you're in this space fighting the good fight. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak to your audience. Now, 76% of you have heard about me. So thank you, Nika, for opening up my world. Appreciate it. Thanks to your great producers. It's been a fun time.
Oh, absolutely. And thanks to each of you for joining us today. Again, we really appreciate you accommodating your schedules to be a part of our Intentional Conversations podcast. We will be back here next Friday, every Friday, in fact, 11 to 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. And I guess co-host, as a reminder, is Charles Weathers. And so please go ahead and sign up for that. This afternoon, all of you who registered, you will receive an email from our team, and it's going to have some of the key takeaways. It'll have a recording so that you can have the replay that you can share with yourself for just to kind of refresh yourself on what we've talked about. But also, don't keep it to yourself. You may want to have a watch party and bring some colleagues or other individuals along, because this has been such a rich conversation. But we just thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again. So take great care. Have a wonderful weekend.
Ciao.